over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time.
Well, good afternoon and welcome back. As always, I greatly appreciate you all joining me today. And let me say off the top, I know we had planned to have Butch Ware with us today, but some last minute scheduling conflicts resulted in our inability to work that out. So we will have him with us next week. As I will tell you all, life sometimes gets in the way of living. U.S.-Iran rhetoric escalates as Trump weighs strikes. Is the Trump administration trying to argue the U.S. into a regional war? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots. Let's try that again. Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historic context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. Before we get to our main issue for today, let me take a quick look at some of today's headlines. Industry leaders plead with the White House on relief from raids after setback. The calls for a reprieve come after the Trump administration reversed a pause on immigration action at farms, meatpacking plants, hotels, and restaurants. As Newsweek has reported, at the end of last week, you all remember, at the end of last week, Trump reportedly told Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, to pause most raids at agricultural facilities and hospitality venues. Then on Sunday, he said he would increase targeted actions in so-called sanctuary cities or cities that are governed by Democrats. Then on this past Monday night, the Washington Post reported that the pause that he called for earlier on farms, restaurants, and hotels was being reversed. We've got some video on this. Let's take a quick look at this video.
There's confusion after Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents were told to resume raids on hotels, restaurants, and farms days after President Donald Trump suspended those raids. The president acknowledged last week the agriculture and hospitality industry's reliance on undocumented workers. But now the administration is reversing its position once again. Yesterday, Trump was asked about the reversal.
We're going to look everywhere, but I think the biggest problem is the inner cities. We're looking everywhere.
Some fellow Republicans are now pushing for the return of those worker exemptions.
Some fellow Republicans are calling for the return of those exemptions. Why? Because many of the states that are engaged in farming, meat packing, and when you look at also primarily meat packing and farms, in particular, you're looking at the Midwest. You're looking, with the exception of California, you're looking at the Midwest. You're looking at red states, and they're saying to Donald Trump, "Look, man, you're killing us." And this, to me, folks, this is clear evidence that Trump really has no set plan in regards to this immigration issue. As we've been told many times, these inconsistencies in statements, in many instances, is due to his lack of clear understanding of policy. And, we've been told many times, he's a transactional individual. It's all about the deal right in front of him. It's all about the deal in the moment. There's no grand strategy here. There's no grand policy here. And it's usually the last person in his ear whose influence tends to carry the day. So now this is my opinion, but what this particular policy dynamic or policy inconsistency tells us is that while on the campaign trail and early in the administration, folks were in his ear, hey, you got to go hard on immigration. That was your campaign promise. That's an easy thing for you to do. You got to go hard on immigration. Those were the folks that were chirping in his ear. Then we get to California and we see the protests in the streets, and he tells ICE, go after these folks in the Imperial Valley in California. And then you start, and it's also important to understand that California is a primarily a Democratic state, but when that to a great degree, most of those Democratic votes come from Northern California. When you get down to Southern California, when you get down to the Imperial Valley, when you get down to where the agribusiness controls the state, now you're in Republican territory. Remember, Ronald Reagan came from California. Remember, Richard Nixon lived in California. You have the John Birch Society, which was based in Orange County, California. So, there is this stereotype of the hippie, tie-dyed wearing shirt, weed smoking, long hair, sandal wearing hippies walking around California. That's LA and Northern California. But from a political dynamic, when you get to Southern California, that's where a lot of your conservative Republican politics comes from. So, and because you also have to remember, from a geography perspective, California spans damn near the entire West Coast, the same way you go from New York to Delaware to Maryland to Virginia to North Carolina. And so you get the same range of politics as you go from on the East Coast, as you go from, say, New York down to Florida. You get that same political dynamic in California as you go from Northern California to Southern California. So anyway, Mark Krikorian, who's the director of the Center for Immigration Studies, which is a right-leaning think tank in DC, he told Newsweek, quote, if ICE at the same time is supposed to step up enforcement in sanctuary jurisdictions, again, predominantly democratically controlled states, can they raid restaurants in New York? Can they raid farms in California? Which of these two directives to exempt certain industries but focus on sanctuary jurisdictions, which of those take priority? See, that's a very good question. What Mark Krikorian is saying is it's a totally backwards, inconsistent statement by the president. The policy makes no sense. He gets so caught up in the whims of the moment, whoever is in his ear at the moment, that he just says, oh, hey, that sounds like a great idea. And then he just blurts it out. And then when he gets back around his limited cadre or cabal of advisors, then they get in his ear and they say, well, Mr. President, that's probably not the way we should go. Oh, you're probably right. And then he comes back out and says the idiocy that he says. So following along this, Newsweek also reports that California could lose an estimated $275 billion from its economy if Trump's plans for mass deportations continue. The immigration crackdown could remove 1.5 million, or 8% of California's workforce, which is expected to harm small businesses and potentially devastate entire industries, including agriculture. Now, some might say, well, look, that's a brilliant plan by Donald Trump. He'll decimate the California economy. They'll have a almost $3 billion hit. And then that will make life more difficult for Governor Newsom. The problem is, if in fact that happens, it's very clear who's responsible. Even though Gavin Newsom is the governor, it's Donald Trump's intervention in the economy that is very clear and evident to everybody watching this thing play out. And then you've got Kristi Noem coming to California and saying in a speech, we're here to liberate Californians from their Democratic or left-leaning, I can't remember the exact quote, but she did say they, as in the Trump administration, are in California to liberate Californians from their government. What? I thought California had an election. I thought California had a free and fair election. I thought Newsom won the election. I thought Karen Bass was elected to be the mayor of Los Angeles. And now, at the federal level, the president decides that he's just going to waltz into the state and overturn the election? See, those are the kinds of statements that are very clear and let people know this estimated $275 $275 billion hit on the economy, it's not going to be due to mismanagement by Gavin Newsom. It's not going to be due to mismanagement by Karen Bass. It's going to be a result of the direct intervention of the president and his acolytes. Here's a little more data, as Larry loves to call me Dr. Data. Here's a little more data. In California, immigrants collectively contribute $23 billion each year in taxes to the federal government, to the state and local governments. $23 billion every year come from immigrants in the state of California. That's an average of $7,000 per immigrant in yearly taxes. So as the president and the Republicans, with this so-called big beautiful bill, which is actually a huge ugly albatross, they can ill afford to have a $23 billion tax hit in one state. And if you extrapolate that across the country, people living in the United States without legal permission paid more than $1.2 billion in taxes. $1.2 billion in taxes. So again, as Larry loves to call me Dr. Data, these are the real numbers behind the foolish rhetoric. These are the real numeric impacts behind the ridiculous rhetoric that the president loves to champion. $1.2 billion in taxes, including $476.3 million in state and local taxes, and $4.3 billion in total spending in 2022. This is according to the American Immigration Council. $23 billion in taxes in California. Let's look at another state, the state of Washington, which is another agricultural state. Apples, pears, cherries. Here's an article from Washington. A so-called perfect season for Washington's sweet cherries turned sour because of deportation fears. It was supposed to be a banner year for Pacific Northwest cherries. And by the way, I love cherries. Pacific Northwest cherries. Cherry production is estimated to be about 10% above last year's. The fruit is high quality in California. And see, here we connect the dots. The fruit is high quality, and California's shorter than usual cherry season meant cherry pickers would be free to migrate north to bring in the cherry crop. There's only one problem. Only one minor problem to this scenario. The workers never showed up. Let's connect some dots. Cherry growers say the threat of deportations under Trump's immigration crackdown is keeping the migrant workforce they rely on this time of year from showing up to work. See, because what happens is the migrants, they migrate from, say, Imperial Valley, California during one season. They migrate north up to Washington State for the cherry picking season, for the apple picking season, and then because they're migrants, they come back south when that's over. So cherry growers say the threat of deportations under Trump's immigration crackdown is keeping the migrant workforce that they rely upon this time of year, they're not coming to work. And cherries are an important business in the Pacific Northwest, which accounts for about 70% of the U.S. sweet cherry export. So it's not only a matter of, can those of us on the East Coast get these sweet cherries from the West Coast, it also has to do with international exports. Washington is the top sweet cherry producing state in the country, followed by California and Oregon. And because of weather patterns and whatnot, the cherries will ripen in California a little earlier than they will ripen in Oregon, further north in Oregon and Washington state. But again, because the California season was shorter this year than last year, and the cherry production in terms of the quantity of product on the cherry trees in Oregon and Washington was greater and ripened sooner, they were expecting the migrants to come from California to Oregon and Washington to supply the world with cherries. Growers, they rely, I'm going back to this article, on a roving migrant workforce that follows the ripening season from the Southwest to California to Washington. I just said that, but now I'm giving you the article as evidence that I'm right. It's a carefully timed migration and delay of these workers coming to the fields can be incredibly costly to farmers. Last year, for example, California's extra long season meant pickers didn't show up in Washington until they were well into the ripening window. And so that's an acute issue for cherries, which are highly perishable. You've got to pick the cherries within a few days of ripening so that they can be sold. So now, again, connecting the dots, what this does, what Trump's immigration policy and attack on migrants is doing, is decimating agriculture in California, in Oregon, in Washington state, and other Pacific Northwest areas. Final point on this, and then I'll take a look at some of these questions or some of these comments. There's also an impact to show you that it's not only a West and Pacific West problem, there's also a problem in the state of Maryland with crab meat. And I know that part of the problem with crab meat has to do with importing cheaper Venezuelan crab meat. Understand that. But there's also another issue which has to do with the Maryland blue crab and not having enough migrant work to pick the crab meat from the Maryland blue crabs as they are harvested. Now, this data is from 2018, but the impact still remains. In his first term, Trump cut the refugee admissions to historic levels. He enacted a Muslim ban, which he's reenacted. He's made it more difficult for immigrants of all states or statuses. Made it more difficult for immigrants of all statuses to enter the country. Notably, again, that was in 2018, and he's implemented this again. Notably for Maryland, Trump changed the H-2B visa program, which is a seasonal visa for foreign workers, from a first come, first served to a lottery system. And this has hurt the Maryland crabbing industry. Quote, women, particularly from Mexico, have come to Maryland during the crab picking season to work and do the crab picking jobs. These are not considered high-skilled jobs. However, it does take a very particular skill to do them. And in 2018, the Washington Post reported about a third of crab picking jobs were vacant across the Maryland Eastern Shore. And many of those familiar with this issue argue that the large-scale mass deportations only hurt the local and federal economies, partially due to the misnomer that deporting working immigrants creates more jobs for Americans. So I wanted to spend some time, and I apologize if you all consider that to be an inordinate amount of time, but I thought it was very, very important to give you some data. Yes, Larry, Dr. Data, to give you some data on the practical, real impact that not only the Trump administration's immigration policy is having, but also how just off the cuff so much of this seems to be, and how irrational and erratic this policy seems to be, and it's having a real substantive impact on agriculture in this country. And so not only is that going to manifest itself by the prices that you see in the stores for apples, for cucumbers, for lettuce. I'm thinking right now of the things that come from the Imperial Valley, and the Pacific Northwest, cherries, so many things. And again, let me tell you something, folks. I did this work for part of one summer. I did this work in Sacramento, picking tomatoes and picking cucumbers. And let me tell you something. That may not be skilled labor, but they call that stoop labor because you spend all of your day stooping over in the fields. And when it gets to be 90, 100, 105, 107 in Sacramento, that's not for the faint of heart. Let me tell you. That work, I did that for a summer when I was in the 7th or 8th grade. Not for the faint of heart. So let's see. Let's go here to some of y'all's comments and see. And again, I appreciate you all staying with me on this because I find this to be important and relevant. So let me see where we are. Hello, everyone, from Pauline. Kevin Baptiste. Hello, Kevin. Trump wants everyone to starve and go hungry. What's new? Workers and red states. Cherie, I don't even know that he's even thought it through to that point. I think that this is so much of a rhetorical issue that he has been so stuck on in his own head. I don't even really think that he's thought through the long-term implications and ramifications of engaging in this type of policy. Cherie, I don't think if you were to go to Donald Trump and you were to say, hey, do you realize that in California, immigrants contribute $23 billion in taxes to federal, state, and local governments? I don't think he would understand that number. If you were to tell him people living in the country without legal permission paid more than $1.2 billion in taxes, I don't think he would really have a grasp of the real impact that this ridiculous policy, the decimation that it's going to have. And we're not even talking about the talking about the remittances to the countries that these people come from. So Cherie, I don't know that it's a matter that he doesn't care. I don't think he knows. Oh, Cherie, A+ for Dr. Wilmer. Well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that. Robert Brown, thank you for that $20 super sticker. I really, really appreciate that. So let me see here. Kevin, San Clemente, Orange County, absolutely. Hence remember Gil Scott Heron's and the rich go to San Clemente. I think he was talking about the Watergate Blues. In the Watergate Blues, he talks about Richard Nixon and the rich go to San Clemente. He was talking about San Clemente, California, Southern California. That's where so much of the Republican base in California can be found. And so here, let me see. What else do we have here? We've got, again, Robert Brown, thank you so much for that. Oh, there's Larry. Thank you for the nice t-shirt. Thank you. This came from not Mama Ruby Sales. This came from oh shoot, I'll remember her name in just a second. Anyway, so with that, let us now go to it's hard for me at times to follow these streams. Okay, Larry, since the orange bozo is transactional, who is in his ear or trying to get us in the war against Iran? And is he giving Steve Bannon a deaf ear on this matter? Well, Larry, I'm getting ready to get to the Iran discussion. Who's in his ear? Hegseth is in his ear on this, the vice president. I believe that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is in his ear. And just today, he just swore in Frank Kushner, or is it Fred? Fred or Frank, one of the two. Jared's father is now the U.S. ambassador to France. And remember, Fred Kushner, convicted felon, pardoned by Donald Trump, is now Jared Kushner's dad. Today was just sworn in as the U.S. ambassador to France, which is not a bad job if you can get it. Wonder how much he paid for that. Every policy decision is based on emotion, not anything else. IXIO. I would take issue with that. I understand your premise, but I don't think every policy decision is based on emotion. I think you have to throw in white supremacy into this. I think you have to throw in the financialization of the American economy and how they are trying to continue to prop up the financialized side of the economy, which is why today Donald Trump is so angry that the Fed did not lower interest rates. And I thought it was really funny that Donald Trump called Jerome Powell, the director of the Fed. He called him a very stupid man. I think that was the quote. He called him a stupid man, or he called him an idiot. Which is it? What did he say? He said maybe he should appoint himself to the Fed. He said, I do a much better job than these people. And then he went on to say, talking about the chair of the Fed, I'm trying to find the exact quote. He called him either a very stupid man, or he called him an idiot. I can't remember which one it was, but put it this way, it wasn't flattering because the Fed would not lower interest rates today. Robert Brown, I'm from Yakima, Washington, which produces cherries, apples, and hops for beer. Without the migrant workers, it's a blues situation for the companies. Absolutely. There's no question about that. And because these are knee-jerk, these are reactionary policies, these are distractions that are being used so that these things take the headlines and not the big, ugly albatross tax bill that Donald Trump is having a problem getting passed. The attack on Harvard, the attack on immigrant students. They're trying to distract you away from some of the real relevant issues, what they're going to do to Social Security, what they're trying to do to Medicaid. Yes, no matter how they try to describe it, they are trying to cut Medicaid. They can talk about, well, we're just increasing the requirements or we're changing. No, what you're doing is you're cutting people's access to the service. That's what you're doing. And so what they're trying their damnedest to do is put up all these trial balloons and trying their best to distract you from the devastation that is actually impacting the called him stupid for not following. Okay. That he would do much. Okay, thank you. Yeah, he called him stupid. So Robert Brown from Yakima, Washington. Again, cherries, apples, hops for beer. And and hops for beer is very, very important to me because I drink an awful lot of beer. Seems like this facade of democracy is too expensive to maintain. Am I wrong? At Dr. Nick, it seems like this facade of democracy is too expensive to maintain. No, it's not too expensive to maintain. You're just, not you personally, the government is putting its money in the wrong places. Oh, back to the question of, because this takes me back to the question, I think it was Kevin that asked, who's in the president's ear? And I also, those that are in control of the military industrial complex, they're in the president's ear. And might I say, AIPAC, the leaders of AIPAC are in the president's ear and also in the president's pocket. And AIPAC is not only in the president's ear, they're in the ear of damn near every member of Congress and every member of the Senate. And we know that the Congressional Black Caucus is bought and paid for by AIPAC. Every member has a handler, and that handler not only hands them the check, but also hands them the script that they're supposed to follow in relationship to the interests of the Zionist colony we know as Israel. Who is AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee. That's what the acronym AIPAC stands for. Let me see. I'd have to look because I don't. Let me see here. Who is the leader of AIPAC? Elliot Brandt is the CEO of AIPAC, and he succeeded Howard Core, who had been the CEO of AIPAC since 1996. So Elliot Brandt is the leader of AIPAC. And that question takes me to this point. If I ask you, who is the leader of the Nation of Islam? 99% of you, I think, would say the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And you'd be right. If I were to ask you, who is the president of the NAACP, you all might have a problem with that because the NAACP is not nearly as relevant as it used to be. Excuse me, but it's Derek Johnson. Derek Johnson is the head of the NAACP. If I were to ask you, who's the head of the Urban League? It's the former mayor of New Orleans, Mark Morial, is the head of the Urban League. And we know the CEO of Rainbow Push was for many years Reverend Jackson, but I believe he's now stepped aside. Why do I ask this? Because if I were to ask you who is the president or the CEO of AIPAC, I don't know. I had to look it up. If I asked you who's the head of the Anti-Defamation League, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. If I asked you who's the head of the Jewish Defense League, don't know. I'd have to look it up. Why does that matter? It matters because those last three, those are institutions. And the leaders of those institutions are irrelevant to the structure, to the activities, and to the power of the institutions. Now, I am not in this analysis. This is not a qualitative, this is not, I'm not telling you whether those institutions are positive or negative, good or bad, or what have you. What I'm telling you is they're powerful. They wield a lot of power. And who runs the institution is irrelevant to the power that it wields. When the minister goes on to the next realm, and that will eventually happen because, as my father would tell you, you can't get out of this thing alive. What will happen to the nation? I don't know. To the Nation of Islam? I don't know. Because it is, to a great degree, that I'm trying to remember the term, it is a personality-driven organization. The NAACP is not a personality-driven organization, but because we don't control it in terms of its board of directors and its budget, it is outside of the control of the African-American community. And who gets put in the head of the NAACP is not so much based upon the community that it's supposed to serve, as it is in the interest of the members of the board. And the same thing for the Urban League. Again, that is an institution, but it's more personality driven than it is structural in terms of its organizational power. And that's something that I think that we need to pay attention to. So that's a side note. Let us continue. It seems like, we went through that. So with that, let's move now to the issue at hand. How much time do I have? Okay, let's move to the issue at hand. And the issue at hand is the U.S. Iran rhetoric escalates. And as this rhetoric is escalating, one has to ask, is the Trump administration trying to argue the United States into a regional war? Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said earlier today that his country does not fear Trump's threats and, quote, absurd rhetoric, end quote. And remember, yesterday, Trump called for Iran's unconditional surrender and warned U.S. patience was wearing thin, but said there's no intention to kill Iran's leader for now, as the Israel-Iran air war has entered its 6th day. Again, Trump called for Iran's unconditional surrender. Why? Why? Why is Iran supposed to surrender? And surrender to what? Israel, according to Netanyahu, this is important, folks. Iran did not start this fight. They did not start this fight. Israel, according to their own prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, they attacked Iran. Iran did not attack Israel. That's not my opinion. That is a fact. And neither Netanyahu nor Trump has provided any evidence to support the argument that Iran was planning to attack anybody. Have you noticed that? They repeat this ad nauseum. And you get all these experts on MSNBC, CNN, all these talking heads. They repeat these narratives and these mantras over and over and over again, but they don't provide any evidence to support the argument that A, Iran is working towards a nuclear bomb, or B, that Iran is an existential threat to Israel, or that Iran was planning to attack anybody. The AP reported 6 days ago. This is the Associated Press. This isn't me. Israel launched blistering attacks on the heart of Iran's nuclear and military structure last Friday, deploying warplanes and drones previously smuggled into the country to assault key facilities. And it's interesting they use the word assault, because assault is a offensive or aggressive term, not a defensive term. Israel launched an assault on key facilities and to kill top generals and scientists, assassinate them. Folks, that was, as Netanyahu described it, a preemptive strike. What is Israel preempting? Because again, there's no indication that Iran was planning anything. But Iran was and has always been very clear. If you strike them, they will respond, as they are legally entitled to do. Remember, on July 31st of last year, Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, not a general, not a colonel, not a military strategist, a political leader, was assassinated along with his bodyguard in the Iranian capital of Tehran. By who? An Israeli attack. Israel assassinated a Palestinian political figure on foreign soil. They started the fight. Let's examine a little more of this. The first thing to understand here is Iran is a sovereign nation. What does that mean? A sovereign state is a political entity that has supreme authority over its defined geographic space or territory and its population. It has the power to govern itself without external interference. That's what it means to be sovereign. And that sovereignty is recognized by outside elements or other states. And that is key to understanding sovereignty. It's a defined territory, a defined geographic space. It has a permanent population. It has a government. And it also has the ability to engage with other nations to support and promote its own interests. What is Donald Trump saying? He's saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Quote, Iran cannot, he said this yesterday, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It is very simple. You don't have to go too deep into it. They just can't have a nuclear weapon. End quote. Says who and why not? Here's an important point to understand. My opinion here. Nuclear weapons, in the minds of many, are more important as defensive deterrents than they are offensive threats. Look at Pakistan, look at India. You're not going to attack Pakistan. Why? Because it has a bomb. That's a defensive deterrent. You're not going to attack India. Why? Because it has a bomb. That's a defensive deterrent. The chances of India launching a nuclear strike on somebody else is very, very minimal. When has India, other than attacking Pakistan and engaging in Kashmir, when has India attacked anybody? Pakistan. Is the chances of Pakistan launching a nuclear strike against China, against Russia, against anybody? Very, very limited. But you're not going to mess with Pakistan. Why? Because they have a bomb. It's a defensive deterrent more than it is an offensive threat. Think about that. So Donald Trump says Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Oh, let's not ignore the reality. They don't want a nuclear weapon. They don't want one. How do I know that? Because the supreme leader of the country, Ayatollah Khomeini, issued a fatwa, which is a clerical statement, similar, I think, to an encyclical by the Pope, but even more powerful relative to the country than an encyclical by the Pope, saying we're not going to do that. And why? Because it violates the principles of Islam. I said this yesterday, and I think Sandra Muhammad agreed with me, and others did as well. Folks, you have to understand the cultural dynamics at play here. And this is something that I think the West is incredibly ignorant about or just doesn't give a damn. But if you're going to engage with an adversary, and if you're smart about engagement with your adversary, you have to understand the cultural dynamics that control the thinking and the actions of your adversary. So Iran is a theocracy. Their government is managed by religious order, and that religious order is Islam. And there are very strict rules of engagement and rules of war that are spelled out in the Holy Quran. And so that's one of the reasons why Iran has been so reluctant to just reflectively respond to the aggression of Israel, is because they're following the Quranic dictates in terms of the rules of war. And one thing you can't do if you're Muslim, you cannot arbitrarily kill innocent people. Think back to think back to the Hanea assassination. And I think it was the Hanea assassination. And Iran told Joe Biden, we are going to respond. And Biden said, oh, no, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Don't respond. And Iran said, oh, no. We are going to respond. We have to respond to this. But our targets are going to be the military apparatuses that were used to coordinate the strike on Hanea. We're going to hit the satellite depots or centers. We're going to strike the military bases that the planes came from. We're only going to strike the military targets that Israel used to coordinate this attack. And then they said, and this is important, they said, once we do that, we consider the matter settled. But if you respond to our response, all bets are off. We're going to do what we got to do. See, that's a key point that they don't tell you on MSNBC. That's a key point that they don't tell you on CNN. That's a key point you won't read in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the LA Times. So for Israel to say they have to defend themselves against Iran, the analogy I would use is, or I would ask Netanyahu, why did you swat the hornet's nest in the first place? If you'd have left it alone, or if you'd have found more humane techniques such as true diplomacy, or, if I've got, and I'm going to call a licensed exterminator to humanely remove the hornet's nest from the tree in my backyard to another space where the hornets or the bees can do their thing and not be disturbed. But I'm not just going to walk out in my backyard with a stick and swat the nest. Why? Because I'm going to get overwhelmed by hornets. Folks, this is not that difficult. It's really not that difficult to understand. You've heard me say 1,000 times, because the adage off the corner is true. Don't start nothing, won't be nothing. So remember, 4 days ago, Netanyahu confirmed this military operation called Rising Lion. Quote, "We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. They struck first. We struck at their weaponization program. They don't have a weaponization program." He's lying to you. He referenced the weaponization program. We talked about this yesterday. That flies in direct contradiction to the March report by Tulsi Gabbard to the U.S. Senate, Trump's national security director. She left no doubt about the nuclear program. They're not building a weapon. And Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader, has not reauthorized the program. He has not rescinded his fatwa. But Netanyahu loves to talk about the nuclear program. And folks, here's part of Netanyahu's evidence. Look at this chart. He presented this at the United Nations. This is his chart. He drew this, maybe his 7-year-old granddaughter or his 9-year-old grandson. Maybe they drew that. Or, that came from the Acme Bomb Company, from the Roadrunner. I mean, this is comical crap. And I got to stay on this for a second, because we're talking about starting possibly a nuclear conflict, meaning Iran, who has a bomb, could be pushed so far to the corner that the only option they see is a nuclear response. Or if they use this mother of all bombs to bomb the Iranian nuclear reactor, that's another nuclear conflict. Not that Iran has a bomb, but they have a nuclear reactor. And you drop that 300-pound or 3,000-pound mother of all bombs on this thing, that's going to give you a nuclear response. And this is what this clown uses as evidence to support the allegation, the baseless allegation, that Iran has a bomb. And we've been hearing, this guy has been saying for 3 or 4 years, if not longer, oh, we're weeks away. Oh, we're months away. Oh, we're days away. Oh, we're years away. Oh, we're decades away. Oh, we're a millennium. I mean, dude, pick a time frame and stick with it. The problem is, when you pick a time frame, because your allegations are baseless, utterly baseless, they have provided no evidence. And when Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump's own, said, all the intelligence reports are saying there's no program, what does he say? Oh, I don't believe her. I don't care what she says. Why? Because her statements of fact are inconsistent with Donald Trump's misguided, lying statements. Don't confuse them with the truth, please. Oh my God. Oh, Annie Pearl Avery. Miss Annie Pearl Avery is who gave me this shirt. Please don't confuse him with the facts. And you got this clown. And I use that reference, and I don't mean to insult clowns. Some of my best friends are clowns. Folks, I got Robert Brown. Thank you very much with his $20 super sticker. Where am I here? Oh, I've got Cyril Mac Hall. Thank you for that $5 super sticker. Greatly appreciate that. Kevin Baptiste, notice they don't F with North Korea any longer. Well, you know what, Kevin? Thank you for that $10 super sticker. And see, that's a great point. That's a great point. They don't mess around with North Korea. Why? Because Kim Jong-un has a bomb. Oh. He has, I kicked my water bottle over. Kim Jong-un has a bomb. And that's why to Kevin's point. Sorry about this, folks. I'm wiping up some water. That's why they don't mess with North Korea. Because he has a bomb. And he has demonstrated the capacity to launch that rascal a long way. There still might be some, I mentioned that one. There still might be some, yeah, I did that. There still might be some question as to whether he can strike the West Coast. I don't think that's a question anymore. I think the question now is how deep into the western part of the country can he go? And are his guidance systems accurate enough to where he can strike the target that he's aiming for? But folks know now, don't mess around. You won't like the result. So again, that's the defensive deterrent effect of the I did mention that. Cyril Mark Hall, thank you very much for that $5 super sticker. Greatly appreciate it. And Kevin, again, thank you for that $10 super sticker. The Bush administration did the same crap before the lead-in to their invasion of Iraq. Zhao, you're absolutely right, and I was going to get to that. And thank you very much for keeping me on point and taking me to that point. The Bush administration did exactly the same thing that the Trump administration is doing now. And we mentioned it yesterday, but I think it bears mentioning again. We have seen this movie before. Where are the weapons of mass destruction that are supposed to be in Iraq, that were supposed to be in Iraq? Where are they? And see, here's the thing. You don't hear in all of this so-called analysis that you get from MSNBC, that you get from CNN, that you get from the Washington Post, that you get from the New York Times. You don't hear them asking these questions. And the folks that are on Air Force One and the folks that are in the Oval Office during these press conferences, you don't hear them saying, Mr. President, George Bush told us about weapons of mass destruction, offered us no proof, and invaded Iraq. You're talking about a nuclear weapons program that your own national security director said doesn't exist, You've offered no proof. Where is the proof? Dick Cheney told us about yellow cake uranium that was purchased by Iraq from Niger. Offered no evidence, and even created a letter, a fictitious letter, to support the lie. We were told about the bromance between Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden. Those dudes were arch enemies. But we were told that they put their differences aside and conspired or were conspiring against the United States. That was a lie. Remember the story about in Kuwait, the Iraqi soldiers that came into the infant, the neonatal unit in the hospital and took the babies out of the incubators and left the babies to die on the floor because they needed the incubators in Iraq. Remember that story? Nayira al-Sabah's testimony before Congress about the alleged atrocities in Kuwait. She lied. Remember the roving, what was it? A mobile home kind of deal that was supposed to be this roving biological weapons lab that was supposed to be roving throughout the desert with the biological weapons in it. Remember that lie? And that was such a ridiculous lie because those biological agents, in order for them to live and thrive, they have to be in temperature controlled environments, which you can't do in a Winnebago. As soon as they said that, it didn't make any sense. So now what you're stuck with is a lying, compliant, or complicit, a lying, compliant, and complicit media. And I'll finish on this point. They're lying by commission and they're lying by omission. You lie by commission when you actively communicate false statements. This is and that's the difference between disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation is when you unknowingly say something wrong. You repeat something you heard, it came from a seemingly credible force, and you repeat it. That's misinformation. Disinformation is when you knowingly, intentionally disseminate or communicate false statements, false information. You make up information, you twist the truth to deceive. That's a lie by commission. That is disinformation, which the president, the prime minister of Israel, and a whole lot of folks on MSNBC and other stations do every damn day. You lie by omission, which is the act of withholding information that, if provided, would provide the proper clarity and context. But by omitting it, you are intentionally deceiving the person, because without that information, they cannot logically come to an honest understanding of reality. So you can influence someone else's understanding of a situation, or you can cause them to believe things that aren't true. And let me give you two quick examples that happened last night. What is this show? This show, I got it on my screen right now. Deadline White House. What's the woman's name? Let me look this up real quick so I can not mislead you. With telling you Nicole Wallace. So Nicole Wallace yesterday on Deadline White House, I had it on, I think it was yesterday. I had it on because I was watching Senator Padilla's speech before the Senate, which, by the way, if you haven't watched it, you need to watch it, because he clearly explains why Kristi Noem was lying in her description about what they did to him and why they did it to him. But anyway, so Nicole Wallace has some guy on who's supposed to know what's happening in Iran. And she asks him, why is Iran doing this? What is wrong with Iran? And he says, well, this goes back to the 1997 Iranian Revolution. He says, where in just one day, the Iranian people rose up against the Shah of Iran, overthrew him in a coup, and the Ayatollah Khomeini took over. That's what he said. And she said, oh, and moved on. Not mentioning the 1953 CIA inspired and directed overthrow of the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, and the installation of the murderous dictator known as the Shah of Iran. Didn't mention any of that. Didn't mention his police force, his secret police force called the Savak, which was the type of secretive police force that so many dictators use to disappear people, to torture people. And in his saying that the Iranians in one day overthrew the Shah, and Nicole Wallace goes, oh. What he didn't tell you was not one shot was fired in the Iranian Revolution. Not one shot. What happened was the Shah ordered a curfew and directed all Iranians to stay in their houses. And they ignored his dictate or his diktat. And they came into the street. And so he ordered his police force and his military to go into the street and confront the protesters. Everybody came out of their homes and went into the streets. And he got in his helicopter and he flew over the city of Tehran, and he saw that he had lost control of his country. And he called the White House and he said, get me out of here. This is over. I'm done. And he fled the country and eventually came to the United States. That was the Iranian Revolution. It was one day. It took one day to run his monkey behind out of Iran. But this so-called expert that was providing this insight about the current status in Iran, he didn't say anything about that history. He didn't say anything about the Shah was an American puppet. and that he was a murderous dictator. He didn't say anything about that. Supported by the United States. He didn't say anything about that. That was a lie of omission. And Nicole Wallace allowed that lie of omission to go through her show yesterday. I saw it, seen it for myself. And then last night, Jen Psaki on her show had a couple of folks on, and MSNBC has been doing this and all the others. They keep talking about the Iranian nuclear weapons program as though it exists. That's a lie of commission. They are making statements that are not true. Scott Ritter will tell you, as a former UN weapons inspector, there is no military nuclear program in Iraq. And what they also don't tell you is that even if they are enriching uranium or plutonium, whichever one it is, even when you get that to weapons grade, now you have to develop a delivery vehicle. You've got to be able to put it in a bomb, to be able to send that thing out, detonate it, and have it hit its target. So they keep talking about uranium enrichment. Oh my God, they're at 80%. And if they get to 82.3799%, oh my God, then they're only however many percentages away. They're minutes. Oh my God, they're minutes away. Lies of commission. They are lying to you. So, with that, I want to thank myself for being my guest today. I look forward to having me back. But in all seriousness, I want to thank you all for tolerating me today and my my diatribe. And still working on tomorrow's guest. Friday will be Dr. David Willalu. And no. Francois is going to join us tomorrow from St. Petersburg, Russia. That's right. He delivered another. They brought him back. Remember the brother I told you about that was on the show that delivered the paper about power in African countries, energy in African countries. They brought him back to St. Petersburg, Russia. He's there right now. He delivered a paper either yesterday or earlier, another paper, got a standing ovation. So Francois is going to join us tomorrow from St. Petersburg. And then Dr. David Willalu is going to join us on Friday. He just got back from Europe. And so he's got a whole bunch of insight and stuff that will keep us apprised of. Gregory Holland, thank you for that $10 super sticker. Greatly appreciate that. And Zhaoyun, history is full of liars. Yes, Zhaoyun, you are correct. AM, that's called psychological warfare. You mean the lying? Yeah. If that's what you're referring to, AM, you are correct. That is, and that has the whole psychological aspects of this has escalated. And let me give you all an assignment for tomorrow. AM, you get extra credit for coming to class today, and AM, you get extra credit for and you're a contributor as well. But you get extra credit, AM, for coming to class today. and making that point about psychological warfare, because what I want you all to do for me tomorrow is Google the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And let me get you the proper spelling of his name. B-E-R-N-A-Y-S. Edward Bernays, B-E-R-N-A-Y-S. He was considered to be the godfather of public relations and propaganda. And no, Zhao Yun, you don't get to give assignments that are contrary to what I'm assigning. This is my class, and you need to put your hand down and no, Zhao Yun, no. Ryan Johnson, thank you very much for that $1.99 super sticker. No, Zhao Yun, you don't get to do that. Because here's why. Because you can, what I want you to do is Google the book, and you can find the introduction to the book online. And I want you to read just the first page of the introduction. You can read what you want. You're reading Chomsky. Well, that's why you'll fail the course, because you're not reading when you come to class, there's a reading list, and you read the reading list. You don't get to read other stuff that I'm not asking you to read and get credit for it. That's how it works. Anyway, I want you to read the first paragraph of Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And it's important to understand when you read Bernays that the Germans used his book. I'm drawing a blank on Hitler's chairman of propaganda, Goebbels. Goebbels used Bernays's work as the basis of the propaganda campaign for the Third Reich. And what you see in the first page of the introduction will explain volumes about what you're seeing and why you're seeing it. So AM, they called it psychological warfare. You're absolutely right. You get extra credit for that point today. And folks, that's your assignment for today, is to Google Propaganda by Edward Bernays, B-E-R-N-A-Y-S, almost like Bernays sauce. That's how I remember it all the time. B-E-R-N-A-Y-S. You can Google the book Propaganda, and you'll find, either on Amazon or somewhere, you'll find just the first page of the introduction. So with that, thank you all for joining me today. Thank you all for putting up with this diatribe. Stay tuned, new episode tomorrow. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. And remember, follow us on social media. Please subscribe. Those of you that are watching on other platforms, please subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get to 10,000, and we're almost there. Greatly appreciate it. This is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots because it's rhetoric-free podcasting. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.